So today what we're gonna do, we're gonna be changing the wheel bearing for the rear wheels. How to change the wheel bearing. So take out the two 12s that holds the caliper in place, move it out. Then you take these 14s holding the bracket in place. We're gonna pop off the rotor. So took the bracket off, and luckily this just came off easy. And you could tell it needed to be changed. Look at the whole back of it, it's all jacked up. The front wasn't cleaning, it has grooves in it, and now it's just kind of, not sure if you hear that, but it's kind of binding whenever it's turning. So that's how I know I needed to change this. Now I gotta pop this off. There should be a 32, I believe, but we're gonna find out. What I had to do is I had to just use if you have a chisel or a smaller flathead, it'll work better. But you had to basically hit it so this dust shield will pop off. But this thing has been on it for so long, it's not really working as easy as it should. So once you see, you could pry it, see all the dirt popping off, then you'll be able to just pop the whole thing off. So just basically walk it around, and there you go. 32. So once you have a 32 socket, you just, if you have a strong enough gun, you just put it on. If not, you have to pry this section back a little bit, so when the gun is spinning, it'll just walk off. You can hear it coming off, but now I'm gonna get a pry bar to see if I can pry it off, see if I get everything to come off, because I'm hoping the race does not split and stay on the shaft, because that would just make this job a little bit more difficult. So that's what I didn't want to happen. The race, which is the back of the bearing, came off. So now I'm gonna have to fight with getting this whole section off. I have to basically cut it, grind it, or find some way to either heat it up to pull it off. So before we start doing anything crazy, I just thought I'll try to use a pry bar, because initially this was on it like that. So I use a pry bar just to pry this section off, and then I just use this, slowly wiggle it in there. Started with a smaller one. Working around, and then I just got this in there. So I just use the pry bar. I rest it on these ears to just wiggle it back and forth, and then when the pressure just popped off. Maybe your own won't be as easy as this, but that's one option you could do instead of having to cut it or whatever. So I tried that first, and then if that didn't work, then I was going to heat it up, try that again, and if that didn't work, then I was going to cut it. But so far, that's one trick I did that helped me get it off relatively quickly. So now I'm going to clean this up, then start installing the new one. So I'm just cleaning this off so I can start installing the new one. So obviously, new, old. I'm just comparing to make sure they are the correct things. They look like it. And there you go, it just slides on. So I'm just gonna put a little bit of grease on the shaft just to make sure, at least for the initial spin, everything is fine. But okay, so this is high temperature grease, so it should not be catching fire like normal grease. Also, make sure you clean the sensor or inspect it to at least make sure the ABS sensor is fine. So far this does not look damaged, so it should be good. Just gonna slide this on. So now you just find whatever the torque reading is and you torque this bad boy down. Okay, so I torqued it down, spinning freely. So this spins a lot better than the previous one. I'll put the torque specs somewhere on the screen. So now all you gotta do is just hit this section in to basically stake the nut, so this way it doesn't back off while driving. So staked a little in. It would be ideal if you got a new nut, but the ones I bought didn't come with a new nut, so it kind of sucks for me. But best of a bad situation, right? So as we all know, there's always more going on. So now I'm going to change the shock. These are OEM shocks with TN springs. Changing and putting on my Koni and ground controls for the rears. I've already done the fronts, and now I have time to do the back. Basically, you get a 14, you remove the seat cushion right here, slide this over like this, and then you just loosen that bolt. Normally I leave one bolt up. I take the one in the back out because it's always the hardest to get to. This one's pretty easy. So now, the good part about doing wheel bearing, I have all the space I need. This is a 17, and you have to be very careful with this, because there's been a few times that where when you're putting it back in, you'll strip out this bracket, because I've done it before. So I'm gonna take that out, and you're supposed to take off this sway bar link. That's a 12, because this way it'll just cause the bracket to move around and you can be able to play with it. Yeah, it's a lot of finagling, but it's good with 2 people, but if not, you can do it by yourself. So now I'm just gonna install those right now. It is a pain, but it can be done by hand. So now we have to compress this, pull it up, so because this has to fit into this section right here. Okay, I know I didn't show it, but since these are aftermarket Koni shocks, I put them to the softest setting, and this way I was able to, you know, push everything up and able to just finagle the screw in. Whenever you're putting on certain of the aftermarket shocks, the coilovers, since these are made for Honda Accords, TL, and TSX, sometimes you may need a spacer in between the actual shock and the low control arm. So I just put a little spacer in there because I don't have the original one, so put that in there so this one, once it tighten up, the airs won't flex. This is how I get that bolt in. I put a pry bar underneath the sway bar just to raise it up a little bit. I get this bolt right here. I put it in halfway. It's not all the way tightened, it's just in that halfway just to line up the bracket. And I'm just gonna, you know, screw it in by hand to make sure this nut come through here without damaging the actual thread in that bracket, because like I said, it's easy to do it. I've damaged that bracket before and I had to get a replacement, so this is the easiest way I found out to do it. So now we're back to original schedule program. I put NSCs on this surface and then I'll clean off the rotors so I could throw the rotors on. Here it is, everything is on. NSCs. Just gotta bend the dust shield back in certain areas to make sure everything is good. Wind in the brake pads, put on the brake pad, put a bracket on, and this section will be done. To the passenger side, things moving a little quicker because I'm not recording, but we're at the same area where we was before. Just gotta put this in here and pry it down to get it out. Okay, this one was a little bit more stubborn than the last, but the same method worked. So hopefully this helps anybody doing it on their Accord. So now just gotta clean this off. There we go. So as always, there's always a little bit of extra work that needs to be done. So it seems as if this shock assembly is a little bit loose. So now I just gotta take these 2 nuts off, tighten it down, and then reassemble it. But besides that, everything does drive good in the car. The wheel bearing did fix the problem, and that's the end of this one.
Tell me pretty lies, look me in the face, tell me that you love me.